Okay. Energy that's like Buddha, do you want to speak through me? All right. He's positioning me on a certain seat, like I am one of the leaders of this religion, Buddhism, like I'm a practitioner, but like the lead practitioner. He's asking me to take a seat there. Okay, it's protected. All right. Hello, Carl. We are something that you might call the energy of Buddha, but this is a little bit edgy. That is, there are a lot of edges to these words, but we are interested in your questions. What do you want to know?
Well, first of all, thank you for joining us today. You
Yeah.
are aware that we're recording this.
Yes.
And Dave will make it available on one of his internet channels so that we can share the information with a wider audience. It's our small way of trying to raise the awareness for our brothers and sisters here on Earth of the process that we've not discovered ourselves, but we have a process here that we've been developing together as a group over the last year or so. And this brings us into contact with a number of visitors. And we're very happy to be able to communicate with you at this time. Could we just clarify, you describe yourself as like a Buddha collective? Is that a good way of
It is something like this. The historical figure that you know as Buddha, Siddhartha, was indeed significant in bringing all these energies together, but they were not exactly embodied in one person. You might think of this as a sort of collective idea, a collective energy, which, as it moved forward, brought together several people, many people, to embody that energy, just as other figures of religious importance were brought together, so are we. We would also point out that it did not end with that one figure, that energy was carried forth throughout the history of Buddhism to some degree by a variety of people. So unlike other religions, it was not something where a prophet showed up and it stopped. A prophet showed up and the voice keeps speaking, and it speaks today to those who are in this practice. It is more audible, perhaps, than in other religions where some of the teachings have been layered through politics and experiences and aren't quite so readily available to one who would go into another institution. The important being that Buddhism exists in the hearts of many, not in a particular place.
would this I get the impression as you were describing the process, and I hate to put down other religions, but I have a picture in my mind as you were describing this, that as the Buddhist faith or the Buddhist as a religion, as Buddhism has evolved, it has evolved. In my mind, I get the impression that it has evolved with a more connected state with the original teaching.
This is the case.
Would this be true? With other religions, because let's say there was more interference from man
Yes.
in the earthly realm. There was control exercised and politics was engaged. And it's my understanding, whether that's true or not, that Buddhism has managed to free itself or remain free from a great deal of politics. It's adhered, or it stayed very closely to the original teachings.
This is largely the case. Let us say that it has stayed closer to the original teachings. Those people who translated from one generation to the next were more faithful to the original ideas. That is, their goal was the actual experience of what they called something like Nirvana. That experience of momentary bliss where you are connected with all there is. In the so far as people were able to maintain that connection and rewrite the sutras, for example, they were able to stay truer to the sutras. It is also the case that the original let us say, writers of Buddhism, for it is always there. It is a sort of energy, a set of ideas, if you will, that when they set out to create it, they anticipated thousands of years in advance how it could be misinterpreted. And they spent a good deal of time making sure that no one strayed from the original teachings. One of them was to maintain a sort of leader on earth that remained true and largely apolitical. This was not perfect. There were indeed some who strayed to some degree, but for the most part, Buddhism has been able to maintain a sort of direct connection to spirit. Its practices have not become archaic. Its practices have not become disconnected. Whereas with many other religions, the politics of the time, the amount of money, the institutions made the original words dimmed.
Is it not also the method within Buddhism that there's a very high emphasis on time spent in meditation?
Yes,
Is
this is
this not
precisely correct.
exactly? And that time in meditation then therefore develops within the practitioners the ability to connect with source
Yes.
and therefore tap into the Buddhist um, is it true that Buddhism actually exists in spirit, or is it something that just exists on earth? I mean, obviously you're a Buddhist, you're a Buddha collective, or we refer to you as this. Do you embody the teachings in the spirit realm?
You might say we are connected to the teachings in the spirit realm. You might think of it as a sort of net that brings us all together to one purpose. The situation is much as you've described. The individual who meditates is directly connecting to spirit. This has been lost in some other religions. They become mired in many layers of culture and hierarchical understandings that have removed the individual from direct relationship. So, in some religions, it is necessary to have a priest between you and spirit. In some religions, you have a priest, but it is not necessary, but helpful. In this particular, let us call it a religion, you are directly in relationship to spirit, if you will. You are 100% connecting. And as you say, you get better each time. It is not necessary for anyone who follows this religion to ever cross the threshold of a temple. You simply can embody the practices of Buddhism, the peace, if you will, the generosity, if you will. You can simply embody these things and achieve much in a lifetime. There is no barrier, if you will, between any individual and Buddhism. Whereas in other religions, there are even historical contexts, crimes, mistakes, errors, and those who were not of the light, who have corrupted the original books. So when you read about Buddhism to a large degree, you will find that nothing has much changed. Whereas if you try to read other texts, you may have to hunt a bit to find the truth. It is also a very specific energy that was released at a very specific time to a very specific set of people. We do not wish to indicate that this release was better than the other releases of the other religions. They were there for a time to teach people what was needed at that time in that particular place. There is no preference for us exactly in a religion. There are just different practices, and those practices which are a little bit more true to the ideal practices. If you are to ask, are we Buddha or a collection of Buddha out in space? We would remind you that everything that is on Earth is a reflection of what is out in space. Everything that you think is channeling, if you will. We are all sort of channeling the whole time that we are on Earth. It's just a question of being conscious of such a channel. And that is what you are doing right now. We might embody the ideas that are encompassed in Buddhism, but that would include many ideas. It would include other religions even within that system, for they're not in opposition. If we go to the fundamental teachings of all religions and religious leaders, they are not that far apart.
At the source, they all have the same source.
Yes. And with a good leader, a true leader, they all have the same intention, that is to help humans. Any religion that is stressing too much to a degree social rules, that is, rules that might appear, for example, archaic today, is one that has been somewhat corrupted. The rule makers have taken over and displaced the actual light, if you will. We don't wish to say that a society or anyone can exist without some of these rules. However, the rules in some religions have become quite removed from their original intention. We would also suggest that some of the rules have been removed, that although Christ embodied the idea of do unto others as you would have do unto you, that particular commandment has largely been removed from the books that supposedly reflect who he was. There has been much corruption in many religions, but in Asia, we were able to maintain a system which kept largely true to the original intention without too much hierarchy.
Can I ask where the original teachings came from? Did they come purely from people sitting in meditation and being gifted this knowledge? Is that where it came from, or was it given more directly?
It was something like this. The
Because I do
people,
hear, for example, in Taoism, there's a story somewhere in Taoism that I've read that it was actually, there was an extraterrestrial element to the information. The information was delivered actually physically from outside. Well, whether that's true or not, I don't know, but I'm always intrigued as to where this information comes from, how it comes into the human race.
part of it is a desire. That is, you have a desire to channel. You are interested in this subject. You work and move forward to learn how to do this. It is your desire that creates, to some degree, the meeting between spirit and yourself. That is, it is not outside of yourself. At the same time, it is outside of yourself. You ask for something, and after some time of asking, after being prepared, after organizing your world in a particular way, and that is the life of a particular individual who follows certain practices, perhaps, let's say, in order to channel, you start to eat more healthy food before you can achieve the channeling. You go through certain life experiences which teach you that channeling is valuable. You consider how to best turn yourself toward the idea of channeling, even before you know of the idea of channeling entirely. And then we come to meet you. We say, you are ready. You are ready now, Carl, to go on this journey. We will meet you. Imagine it's sort of like a cafe out in space. You will wait there at the seat in a sort of prepared circumstance, and as you are continuing your desire to be met, we will, the time is right and it is appropriate for your race, we will come to meet you. We would not necessarily describe this as a physically embodied extraterrestrial. It's more a sense of ideas or a sense of desire, if you will. So when you have this desire, it produces the response. The response is there and it awaits you. And then it sort of enters the minds of many people at the same time. Let's say perhaps that there were 10 Siddharthas in India, but a few of them got a bit distracted. One of them went more towards war and power. Another was no longer interested in the work, but created some other field to play in. That is sort of what happens. However, one or two of those Siddharthas, for there were others that embodied similar lives, there is an awareness among such people. It is not only the Buddha and such a person who carry this light, for there are others around them who are ready to accept it. It is sort of like an idea, and just before you have that idea, you know you're about to have that idea. Or you put yourself in a place of opening up to all ideas, and ideas will come to you. So, an example would be from Dave's life. He has been trying to figure out a way to be a little bit more financially successful, if you will. And as he's done this, ideas are starting to come to him. Possibilities about how he might ease his life in a way are coming to him. This is not so unusual or extraordinary as a UFO landing on Earth and giving the advice. That did happen some time ago. There were creatures from other planets on the Earth that came to instruct and give information, but this was only appropriate at an initial level. It was necessary then for the human race and the animals to be in a certain way, to figure things out in their own way, to progress over lifetimes and become closer and closer on Earth to accepting the ideas of peace and equality and kindness and non-judgment. They all were practicing this until there was a sort of overflow. And that is, there were so many people ready for these ideas that Spirit came to meet them. It's not one side or the other. It really is a sort of desire being met with desire.
Okay, you gave a lot of information there, and I'm trying to pick through some of it. You mentioned Dave and his wish to become more successful financially with what he's doing, and I've heard there are many teachings now on Earth. There's the law of attraction and all these things, which are encouraging us that the universe would actually provide for us. We don't have to. We need to stop worrying. This is one of the things that I'm getting, that we need to stop worrying about how we put food on the table. If we just follow our passion, the universe will then provide for us. Is this a good way of I mean, this is my understanding of how it's taught. Is this how it works? Is this, or is this just being misunderstood?
This is a very complicated topic, as are many topics which you might discuss with Spirit. In this particular case, it is not exactly like everybody is in such a position that they can merely desire something and have it show up. Many people are very involved in many different situations. They might ask simply if this war would stop, if this war where I'm living would stop, and they will pray in such a direction. And that is important for them to do because that is the most important thing for them at that moment. Not that they should achieve business success. There are other people in other places who are in a better situation to create such an experience. All people can meditate and to some degree change the experiences they have. We would even suggest to a great degree. There are also very many examples where people must experience difficulty in their life to learn what they need to learn. It is, for example, a person who breaks their arm. They might have just been on the verge of some kind of breakthrough, something important that they needed to know spiritually in their lives, and now their arm is broken and they must spend a good deal of time attending to the arm. The arm also has something to teach us. It's not just about the money or achieving some grand success. That is one way of speaking. It might be important to consider the arm and the meaning of rest and how much time and caring for others and being cared for by others. There might be a time when a person needs to know that they have some limitation. They need to focus on one particular thing at this moment. There are other people who are sort of milling around. They are moving around in a circle and they are trying to figure out what they should do, and they are desirous of a change, but they don't know how to make a certain change. And there are enough people doing this at the right time, at a particular time, that spirit sends a sort of message, often through a messenger like Abraham Hicks, as you've spoken of, and that person will deliver a more clear message than each individual person could understand on their own. We do not wish to suggest that this is the only way of being. It is just a particular time where it is necessary for a set of people. We also do not want to suggest that wealth and poverty are exclusively up to you. Many are born in difficult situations, and we do not wish to suggest that it is their fate or their responsibility or they must change things. All humans have varieties of experience. Some of them desire to have the experience where they can be masters of their fate a bit more than they are. What is a master of their fate? It is not somebody that controls everything that happens to them. It's somebody who sees things happen and considers their response and learns from previous responses how to respond better. It is someone who is able to some degree to step out of the river that they are into and into another river. This is the sort of consciousness that's evolving right now, and this is why these teachings are important right now. You are just beginning to realize that you can get out of one stream, that you can put yourself in an emotional place, a psychological place, where you can decide this old experience that I'm having over and over again doesn't need to happen in the exact same way. You can decide you have learned what you need to know from a negative experience and just move on. It is useful if this is conscious. It might just happen. But if you consciously decide, I do not want to live in this cycle anymore, I am going to break the cycle and change. An example is Dave. So last week, he experienced something he never experienced before, a thing called tinnitus. He had no idea what was going on. He was so disturbed and upset he could not sleep for days. He went and spoke to his neighbors about the strange noise that he was hearing. He spoke to his partner. Nobody else was hearing it, and still he could not actually believe that it wasn't an external sound. However, it was not an external sound, and once he heard that, he started to reflect, what could this mean? And he looked at a bunch of videos. What could it mean? And there were many factors involved in finding out that, yes, he has turned the volume very up to spirit. He has turned this volume up loud enough that he is hearing it all the time. And he needed to take some time, spend some time calibrating that sound. So he made himself get up at 6:15 and go to yoga. He made himself eat healthy food throughout the day. It's sort of like a small problem is presented to you, and it is asked, how will you respond? How will you make this a part of expanding your consciousness, even if it is very unpleasant? Dave finds it extremely unpleasant not to be able to sleep. It upsets him drastically. But it was interesting. This time he was not nearly as upset as he was in the past. He was able to say, this is what is happening, and I will do my best during the day to calibrate these energies and not to get too stressed or upset. And he will investigate further and change his behaviors. All of those listening have had these experiences where they have realized this is not a pleasant situation. Can I do something to change? And when I do something to change, can I look internally and see what needs to be changed? The interesting event of, let us call it Abraham Hicks, is that these ideas came together in one person who was able to articulate them at that particular time. Others had similar ideas and they were also significant, but the time was not perfect. It was more mainstream, if you will, to come up with these ideas. You can put them in a book that explains things in such a way that the average person can understand well what is going on here. And this is the appeal. These teaching devices, these sort of plans, if you will, of making changes are not just about the material growth. Part of it is to let everyone know that you can change things in your life. You may not change everything. For example, you live in the state of Colorado. You may not be able to immediately change from that state. You might take steps to change out of that state if you wish to leave. However, in the meantime, you are still in Colorado. What can you do? You've tried many material things. You've tried physically changing. You have tried to save money and it has not worked out. So you are compelled to look within. And this is the true message of this work. It is compelling people to look within and see, what am I doing? What cycle am I creating for myself so that the same situation of, shall we call it, failure keeps occurring over and over again? One would think, for example, those lessons I learned, why are they not being learned? What am I missing here? And the missing component is the internal component. It is the awareness of self, the awareness that emotions can, to some degree, be projected and a future can be created. Again, we want to stress this came at a certain time in a certain place for certain people who were ready for that change. And once they started to realize they could change some things, they could project themselves out into the future merely by meditating or feeling in a particular way and projecting those feelings out into the universe, they realized that they had much more power than they thought. They realized, in fact, that they could go from just simply asking for money. And we want you to know that Dave did this very successfully after many years of skepticism. Then he realized something very special. If he could change the energy around money, he could change the energy around finding a new career. And so he did, in fact, the career that he has always wanted, working together with spirit. It is much like this. The financial gains are the threshold across which people move. And once they move across that threshold, they find that there is much more to be desired and created. This is not a totally simple process. However, if you do not get stuck at the threshold, if you move beyond just the idea of creating money, for example, people will start to discover there is so much out there that they can create. We might think of this as something like the internet. No one could have believed such a system was possible 100 years ago. It would have seemed absolutely outrageous. Even in the 1970s, this would seem somewhat far-fetched. However, as minds and desires came together, this system was created so that information can be transformed very immediately and directly. This is similar to what is happening with spirit. People got together, as did the V group, and they decided that we will speak to spirit. And they are able to do so, not just within themselves, but as a group. They are even able to record these experiences and share them with others. But this all started with a very simple desire to have a better way of life, in Dave's case, to not be constantly worried about his financial life. That was just one step. in the direction that we have taken him, and one step in the direction that many people have moved within.
So the key step here is to move, is to make a connection within, connect
Yes.
with your higher self, and learn how to be, I guess, guided by your higher self. But
there is a good deal of truth to what you have said. It is sort of like a person observing themselves. This is a not necessarily common trait. There are many people who cannot look at themselves and see themselves for who they are. The first step is to notice who you are and what you are doing. If you can stand at yourself, looking at yourself without judgment, it is very helpful to your processes.
The key here, though, is understanding the voices in your head. Is it me I'm listening to, or my higher self? And that's always that's always the difficult one for me. Anyway, I struggle with this.
Yes. Well, let us take this point because it is an important point. How can one notice the difference between higher self and self? And this is pretty complicated because, of course, there isn't such a huge distinction between higher self and self, but the higher self will always look at you without judgment. They will say to you, these things have happened in the past and has caused reaction in you. Is that reaction beneficial to you now? Let us say that you had an incident in childhood which was very unpleasant, and throughout your life, a similar situation will evoke the same emotional response. You will emotionally be upset in the same way that you were when you were a child, even though the stimulus is different, and you will repeat and repeat and repeat this until it becomes a sort of pathway in your mind. I feel this feeling, I become upset, I have this reaction, maybe I'm even in terror for a moment. Your higher self will never put you in such a situation. It will never look at this and say, you are a fool, you are a bad person, how could you do something so stupid? Behave differently. Your higher self would look at you and say, we understand why you are doing this. We accept you totally with 100% love, and we want you to know you are loved. If your higher self doesn't sound like this, if it does not sound like a non-judgmental entity, it is in fact other, let us call them energies, working upon yourself. So if you are able to get into a state where you are speaking to, let us call it a part of yourself that is a non-judgment, but observes, it merely observes a certain behavior, it merely thinks of this behavior and considers perhaps the first time that a reaction was caused, and has sympathy for that person. For you all desire sympathy. No one is evil. All of us have reasons for how we started on our path. We have reasons for why we are somewhat in a gray area sometimes in our life. It is just a confusion that envelops a person that makes them think that it is an external factor. If only I had more money, this problem would be away. However, it's not like that at all. It is really a state of being that is where you exist, if you will. If you can stand outside that state of being, and this is why we recommend meditation, for the beginnings of meditation will make a person aware. I got upset today. Why did I get upset today? It wasn't about the cold food, for example. It was about the coldness of life that I feel like I have always felt. That is, the food that's cold is a trigger for an awareness, the feeling, I am always misunderstood, life is cold, and the planet is unkind. Once you sit down in meditation and you realize it is just cold food no more, this is just a memory no more, then you will ask yourself, why? Why do I always go to the negatives and make such huge generalizations? It is because the coldness that I experienced at a certain point in my life was so cold, I have not yet really completely understood it. Let us stand outside of this and see it for what it is. Let us see it as a sort of bad habit, that I am pessimistic. And again, as we are viewing this, we are not judging the person that has a bad habit. There could be every reason why that person has a bad habit, and we will accept totally that person with their bad habit when they go into the light at the end of their life if they never deal at it. However, if you are able, through meditation or in any other way, to stand outside yourself without any kind of judgment and see things for how they are. Whenever you are doing this, you will notice there's no edge of cruelty. Not only you are not judged, but you will avoid judging others as well. When you are in such a space, then you are speaking to your higher self. If at any time anger leaps in, if at any time you feel righteous against another, that is not the higher self. That is the original self reacting to the events of their life. Can we make this more practical? I think if we give an example, politics. So when sometimes Dave is considering what kind of videos he should do, he sometimes slips into his political mind and he gets righteous. He is angry for unkindnesses that were done to him and others. He will raise his fist in the air in a sense and say, it is not fair. This is not right. These people are terrible people and they should be judged and put in their place. We should all know and triumph over them, etc. This is not his higher self. This is his lower self arguing and rationalizing and sort of weighing things in his analytical mind. And that self has an appropriate time and place. But his higher self will say to him, all people are originally good. There is no real evil. There is just people who are on a different path than he is. And their paths may sometimes bump up against each other, but those paths teach each other. You might think of any politician you consider extremely dark, and you cannot find any silver lining in such a politician. However, the silver lining is that those who stood in contrast to such a person gained much. They, perhaps through great difficulty, moved towards the light. Perhaps they were generous. Perhaps they were helpful to those who were persecuted. The dark force, as you call it, the person on a negative path, if that is a word that we can use, was merely, in a sense, giving everyone else the opportunity to live up to the words that they espoused. That is, it is very easy if you have an easy life to say, oh, I am a good person. I always help others. I never say unkind things and I do not gossip. But imagine a time where the village where you live is at war and you must now show up in an extremely difficult situation and do the right thing, do all of the things that you said that you were. In some sense, this is the opportunity to make your ideas real, to make yourself experienced, not just through ideas, but through actions and deeds and interactions. As we do this, we do not want to put so much pressure on every individual that everything that they do must be perfect. If you have the intention, for example, to raise the vibration of the people around you, and you go ahead and you make this attempt, your desire may be perfect, your desire may be pure and light. However, something goes wrong. It is not the right timing, or you choose the wrong words, or people don't necessarily understand you the first time. You must work through it. This is humans working through time. World War III did not happen in one day. It happened over many years. So people had to continue to embody themselves, not just for a moment, but perhaps for many years throughout great difficulty. Perhaps they needed even to be clever, to be tricky, to not let others know what they were doing.
much of what you've described here, we talked about the ego. I mean, that's what we're describing here when we talk about the higher self. And if that voice that you're listening to is non-critical, then it's probably your higher self.
Yes.
And you described, using Dave as an example, that when we get into political discussions, often it's our egoic mind that takes over because it's in the here and the now. And it's how do we, if we allow the ego too much control of our lives, it becomes stronger. How do we, is this a good, we know it's not a good thing because we know that when it goes that far, I think that's why we have the politicians that we have today. They are so in their egoic minds. They really are not interested in other people. They're only interested in their self-serving beliefs.
Yes.
How can we protect ourselves from going down that path? How should we be destroying the ego? Could we live without ego? Or does the ego actually serve a fundamental process that we need in our lives?
Do not confuse the ego with the egotistical. That is, some people identify only with the ego and they become 100% the ego, and then they are nothing more. Their soul, let us say their soul guidance system, will knock often on the door of the ego, but that door will remain closed. The ego is something quite necessary. If you look at children and you see them developing who they are as individuals, you will see a beautiful thing. The children are learning what their preferences are, what they like to do. They are also learning how to protect themselves. Imagine how dangerous it would be for a child who had no ego to walk down the street. Anyone could take advantage of such a child. Anyone could make that child into anything that they wanted. Children could be horribly exploited and sometimes are by such people. The ego is the one that says, no, I will not let you exploit me. For a child, it says, I will not get in that car. I feel strange with this person. I don't like you. This is important. It is necessary for the development of an individual. And we would say within the spiritual community, there are some egos, but there are also some who deny their egos. And this is not healthy either. Such individuals might need to say, stop. I cannot teach anymore today, or you are not a student that is worthwhile. You're not listening to me. You're merely here for your own agenda. And they need to kick such a person out of the group because they are not helpful. That is, to some degree, ego. To some degree, let us give an example. Dave once did some shamanic work in a place that was not at all comfortable. And during his session, several people arrived late and joined the group. They behaved in a way that was totally inappropriate. They ruined the group for everyone there because they were childish, let us say. Dave, although he continued that session, never held a session in that place or worked with those people again. This was important. He was to some degree insulted. To some degree, he was angry that the sacred space had been ruined by a variety of people. It was in some part his ego that said, no, I am better than this. What I have to offer is more useful than the way these people are receiving. This is the way that it must be. Had he continued to give sessions in that particular place, no one would have been served. It would have taken time away from better groups that he organized himself. We might call that something like ego. The person that says, no, I can lead this group better at my home where I can manage the circumstances around me instead of in a lousy place that doesn't work very well. That is ego, if you will, but it is not a bad form of ego. A bad form of ego where it is nothing but ego, where it never questions itself. It doesn't do those things that we were speaking of. For example, we were talking about standing in a river where you have an emotional response. The ego-based person goes back to, there's nothing wrong with the river. The river is great because it is the river that I am standing in. And if anybody says this river is wrong, they are the ones who are wrong, and I will beat them down until they adhere to my river. And they will go on in such a way that they are completely enmeshed with the ego. However, it is, and let us say, non-ego experience to look at such a self, to say, I have been mired in one way of thinking because it is advantageous to me. It is always about one story. Perhaps there is more to the world. An ego-based child at some point realizes that there are other people and that it is not necessarily good for them or anyone else to remain only in ego and selfishness. Think of yourselves as children. You were once largely ego-based, but there came a time when your ego self was not quite so present. Perhaps you had an experience in school where other students did not accept you and you had to reform your ego and look back at the ego and say, well, maybe I did not want to be friends with those people. Maybe I should behave in a different way, etc. This is somewhat tricky to understand what is ego and what is not ego. But it is also somewhat tricky to balance, to say, yes, in my life, I wish to accomplish certain things just so that I can accomplish them. That is, in a sense, pure ego. To desire, for example, to learn how to channel is something that one desires. You don't desire it for others. You desire it mostly for yourself, for the experience of learning how to do it. And that is not a bad thing. It would be a bad thing, however, if you identified with the person that channels and says that they are impermeable, they are the best, no one should be able to question them, they are the best channeler of all time. This is a difference. It is a great distinction. And it is a sort of tightrope that people walk on, especially when they're doing spiritual work. When is it okay to reside in my ego? When do I want to consult my ego to decide, this is a limit. This person is not behaving appropriately. It's not that they are questioning me and my ego is unhappy with the questioning. It is that the behavior is not appropriate and I must step in and say no. It is a sort of balancing. It might also be the reverse, where a person acts not necessarily without reflection in a moment of stress, in a moment where they are not certain exactly what to do and they repeat an old pattern, but then afterward they think about what they have done. Perhaps somebody confronts them and says, that was not a kind thing to do, and they think about it and they discover, yes, indeed, that was a sort of childish reference to ego, which I got stuck in for a moment and I made a mistake and now I must apologize perhaps or rearrange things and move on. So it is not a question of ending the ego. It is a question with a balance between the ego, which must do what it does on its own quickly and perhaps necessarily. It is perhaps necessary in a moment that you physically protect yourself from an attacker. That is all ego, and there is nothing wrong with that. What would be wrong is to consider that since you've successfully defended yourself from such an attack, that you are the most glorious fighter of all time, and everything is about you and fighting, and that there is no more. It is a sort of balance between the energies of the self and the not self, which humans have to go through. And we must admit that this is extremely challenging. This is a challenge that we don't necessarily experience where we are. I don't wish to say that we are ego-less, but our ego is sort of spread out in a collective, if you will. It's a little bit more like a desire to become than an individual body, which must eat, fight, make money, gain fame, etc.
So the ego isn't a purely human aspect. It's not, it just doesn't exist in the human structure. you also have ego in spirit, but not in quite the same way.
Yes, everything that you experience on earth is a reflection of us. It's not the same, but is a reflection. Perhaps you might even prefer the word a refraction of us, because there could be quite a bit of difference between the ego that is the entity that is Seth, for example, and the ego of the individual. Obviously, if it's an ego of 1,000 people who've lived 1,000 lifetimes come together collectively to speak, that is quite a different thing from an individual who wishes to become famous on TikTok, for example. They are not the same, but they are not totally dissimilar.
Thank you. While we were just talking, about similarities between here on earth and the spirit world, there's something that I struggle with, which is the understanding of the different dimensions. We perceive here on earth that we're in 3 dimensions, and there's a lot of talk in the spiritual communities today about awareness shifts to 4th and 5th density.
Do you wish to know how these are organized?
I would like to understand that, because we are rooted in a 3-dimensional world, and I really struggle to understand if somebody says people are shifting to a 4th or 5th density. Is this actually, are they talking rubbish, or is this something that actually is feasible? Because as long as they're in 3 dimensions, surely they can only perceive 3-dimensional reality. Could you shed some light on this?
Well, we hesitate to some degree to create yet another hierarchy that humans will cling to. This is one of the problems that you have, is these hierarchies. Is the difference between 5 and 6 so great? Well, no, it is not so clear. That is, in a moment, you could go from one density to the other quite quickly, and you would not necessarily know, at this moment I'm in the 5th, at this moment I'm in the 6th, etc. We are a little leery of creating such strict lines between things, because that is a sort of block, if you will, to the true understanding. The true understanding is that right now you are speaking to the light. The true understanding is that you can speak to light from any density, if you will, with a bit of preparation and practice, no matter where you are on the planet, no matter how enlightened you are considered to be. You can always speak to the light. You do not need to achieve the 4th before you get to the 5th, etc. We are somewhat leery of creating this because it is a human way of understanding something that is extremely fluid and complicated and not necessarily explicable on your terms. We would tell you,
we're in an energetic universe. Things are
yes,
shifting all the time,
constantly shifting. Your energy is shifting. Yes.
So people that believe they're in 4th density or 5th density, they're just wrong. They're just.
Well, we would not say that they are wrong. We cannot generalize about every single person who says this, for that would be many people, and they have many different aspects to their consciousness. No, it is not really wrong. We would question someone who would say, I am in 4th density, and we would ask them, again, is that your higher self speaking, or is that your ego speaking? We would also say that these are cliff notes. These are ways to shortcut an understanding and go directly to speaking and meaning, which sort of undermines a good deal the process of spirit. So they are not wrong. We would just say that each of those people may be speaking about a different thing. They would be wise to reflect on why they would use such terms in describing themselves. Curiosity about those different levels is totally appropriate, though, as we've said, beyond a clear understanding of human experience. So, for example, when you consider the chakras, you do not have an exact and specific idea of every chakra. We know that they align with certain things. The root chakra aligns with certain meanings, but it is a bit more fluid, a bit more opaque. What you do with this particular chakra can evolve and change. The one chakra affects the other chakras. You could solve a question in one chakra and it can have a great effect on all the other chakras. It is not such a simple idea. Humans are looking for a way of understanding what cannot be understood precisely. They are looking for a way to express meaning. And so they have chosen certain words, certain ideas, just as karma is an idea that they try to express, but it is not at all what it is perceived to be. We would suggest that you cannot totally understand the meaning of karma as a human. You may have a fairly good feeling about it, but feeling is not understanding. The difference might be heart and mind, although we again don't wish to draw such clear lines. But within your awareness and understanding, a feeling is closer to a logical awareness, to levels of spirit. We would ask the person who is trying to decide whether they're in fourth or fifth density to consider why they would need such terms. What is the use of such terms? Not that they are not useful, but let us reflect on those terms and consider what the meaning is for you. And it is not useful to think about the meaning for others, but for oneself. What is the meaning of that? What does it mean to be in fourth dimension? Does that mean that you are more aware of the ego self and the dynamic between the ego and your own guide? Is it a sort of connection that you are making to spirit where you are now not so worried about the mundane things of your life, but are much more open and perhaps starting to hear messages from the universe? Is it a state of mind where you reside mostly in spirit, but only rarely in your body? All of those states of mind are worthwhile and to be reflected upon. It is not necessarily the best idea to worry about one layer or another. This is perhaps worth considering, but it is not necessarily worth dwelling on. It can become a distraction from the actual work. Instead of considering what layer one might be on, consider activities and actions that might bring one closer to spirit. It is not necessary to understand everything about these layers to go to those layers. It would not be possible for you to understand all of those layers in their vast complexity, and it would be a distraction if you spent your life merely studying them on an intellectual level. It is more useful for you to move into those levels and experience them, and to come back and do your best to describe them. And sometimes people have indeed described them in these layers, these levels. There's nothing wrong with that per se. That is just the way they are trying to explain an experience that they simply cannot explain, because an emotional experience is not necessarily explicable. What is a tear? Why does a person cry? How does that happen? We could not explain that to you logically in a perfect fashion, but you know how you feel when you are crying.
Wow, thank you very much for that very clearly understanding and putting that into perspective for me, because that's been a challenging question for me. Unfortunately, here we have a clock, and I've just noticed on the time that we're approaching our end time. So I would really like to thank you for joining us here today. I've really enjoyed the dialogue that we've had. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you, and thank you for being here with us at this time.
We have enjoyed this time very much with you, Carl. You are doing terrific work, and we will speak for Dave and say that he really appreciates the questions that you are asking, because he is not able to ask these questions when he's in the state. We will, with all our love, sent to you and those on your planet, end this session.
Thank you. Bless you.
Okay, just stepping back. Okay, getting myself a
How
glass
are you,
of
Dave?
water. Good.
You didn't come up for air there.
No?
That was just yeah.
Was it any good?
It was fantastic. It was
Okay.
pouring out of you. It was
Really?
pouring out of you. Yeah,
Wow.
I had to take my top off. The energy was so
Really?
yeah.
How awesome is that? Great. Well, I'm looking forward to looking at what I said. And I'm going to really look forward to putting this online. Carl, I really can't thank you enough. You are the greatest question asker. And I have to tell you, I asked other people and they're like, no, Carl's the one who needs to ask the questions. He's the question asker.
I've got to be honest, I've got a list of questions. I was having a discussion, so it just flowed. I had one question that I managed to answer. I think everything else was just the discussion. It just unfolded
Fantastic.
Naturally, like being in the pub.
Good one. Okay. Well, let's do it again sometime. Maybe we'll get to some more questions.
Okay, lovely. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you, Carl.
Bye.
Bye-bye.